The United States has a long and complex history of involvement in African politics, often using the Central Intelligence Agency, CIA, to either support or overthrow regimes that it deemed unfavorable or a threat to its interests. This involvement can be traced back to the Cold War. After the Second World War ended in 1945, the United States and the Soviet Union became two very powerful countries. They started a competition called the Cold War, where each side tried to be the best. The US believed in capitalism, where people can own businesses, while the Soviet Union believed in communism, where the government controls everything. During this time, both countries wanted to spread their ideas and influence other nations. They often helped certain leaders stay in power, or even worked to change governments that didn't agree with them. Sometimes this meant helping to remove leaders who were seen as a threat to US interests. This meant that the US got involved in many African countries' politics during the Cold War, trying to support governments that shared its beliefs. When Belgium reluctantly granted independence to the Democratic Republic of the Congo in 1960, three men were central to the government of the new nation: Joseph Kasavubu, who became the president, Patrice Lumumba, who served as prime minister, and Mobutu Sese Seko, who was the Secretary of State for National Defense. Shortly after independence, Katanga, a mineral-rich region, seceded from the country. Instead of helping Lumumba fight the secessionists, Belgium deployed its troops to Katanga to support them because it was the main beneficiary of the minerals. Lumumba sought help from the United Nations, but his request was turned down. There was only one option left, and that was the Soviet Union. The Soviets sent aid. This raised concerns among Western powers, particularly Belgium and the United States, who feared he might become a communist ally. President Kasavubu reacted by dismissing Lumumba from power in September 1960, leading to a bitter power struggle between the two of them. In December 1960, he was arrested by forces loyal to Colonel Mobutu Sese Seko and handed over to the secessionist faction in Katanga, a mineral-rich province backed by Belgian interests. On January 17, 1961, local authorities executed Lumumba and his allies, and his body was later disposed of in a brutal manner that involved being dismembered and dissolved in acid to eliminate evidence. Meanwhile, in the east of the country, Soviet and Cuban-backed rebels called the Simbas rose up, taking a significant amount of territory and proclaiming a communist People's Republic of the Congo in Stanleyville. Congolese government forces fully defeated the Simba rebels by November 1965. US President Eisenhower gave an order for the assassination of Lumumba. A survey of declassified US government documents from the era notes that the CIA initially focused on removing Lumumba, not only through assassination, but also with an array of non-lethal undertakings. By a plebiscite of 1960, Ghana became a republic, and Nkrumah became its president, with wide legislative and executive powers under a new constitution. Problems began for Nkrumah when he concentrated his attention on campaigning for the political unity of Black Africa. He described himself as a socialist and a Marxist, campaigned tirelessly for his vision of a united Africa with a single parliament. After multiple failed attempts on his life, Nkrumah's government became authoritarian in the 1960s as he repressed political opposition and conducted elections that were not free and fair. In 1964, a constitutional amendment made Ghana a one-party state, with Nkrumah as president for life of both the nation and its party. On 24 February 1966, Ghana's military staged a coup while Nkrumah was on a state visit to China. The coup plotters had the backing of the United States. The conspirators, led by Joseph Arthur Ankara, named themselves the National Liberation Council. During Nkrumah's administration, Ghana never borrowed money from a foreign firm, but following the coup, Ghana invited the International Monetary Fund and World Bank to take a leading role in managing its economy, which led to high inflation. Starting from 1965, various rebel groups started fighting from the northern part of Chad to overthrow the Chadian central government in the southern region. The north was a Muslim-populated area that was largely supported by Muammar Gaddafi, a staunch enemy of Western countries and America. The rebels ultimately won in 1979, and Goukouni became the president, while Hissène Habré was given the position of Minister of Defense under Chad's new transitional coalition government. Goukouni favored alliances with Libya and the Soviet Union, while Hissène sought support from the US. Looking to reduce Soviet influence in Chad, the United States backed Hissène in his efforts to oust Goukouni, which he successfully did in 1982. Having become the country's new president, Habré created a one-party dictatorship, ruled by his National Union for Independence and Revolution, notorious for widespread human rights abuses. He was overthrown 3 years later in the 1990 Chadian coup d'etat by Idriss Déby and fled into exile in Senegal.